Splatoon 3 patch 4.0 has done so much more than you might think, and I wanted to actually show you guys a few of the comparisons on some of the most important things that we can bring out from this patch. So hello guys and welcome to Dude, well that is SW2 Dude, and we're going to do, well I guess this is one of my first patch comparison videos, but it's going to be done in a little bit of a different way than I've done in the past, so let's get into it. So the first thing that I wanted to bring up is the Super Chump changes, which supposedly got a huge painting buff, which was seen in the patch notes, of course. Now, the thing that I first noticed is that when the decoys actually land, the paint around them is much more significant to how patch 3.1 was. As you can see in patch 3.1, it's only just a little circle, but as you can see in patch 4.0, the circle's actually much larger. And I think the thing that we can bring out of this is that if you were to directly shoot your super chumps at somebody and all these decoys land next to an opponent, the chances of them getting super suppressed and taking damage from just your ink is much more likely compared to what it was before. When the chumps explode, it's actually kind of hard to see the actual difference in terms of like how much more they're actually painting. Not gonna lie, I had to like look at this a couple of times just to see, oh, is it really been changed? But I don't even really feel like that part of the super chump is actually one of the most prominent changes. I think generally, it's just the landing of the super chump is much more suppressive. And of course, the minimum amount of damage that you can take from a super chump is now 35 instead of 25. So super chumps are now going to be something that you're going to have to look out for just a little bit more, because there is a new weapon with the super chump, which is the Dually Scorcher, and that one is probably going to be one of the more popular ones just compared to the other super chump weapons that we have right now. So yeah, probably going to have to watch out for that. Now, honestly, one of the biggest changes, in my opinion, is the Sloshing Machine, where now it is 5 frames slower in intervals of when you're continuously sloshing. Now, you can see from the two comparisons, the Sloshing Machine on the left in patch 3.1 is just much faster than how it is right now in patch 4.0. This right here is a massive change in terms of how quick and how well you're going to be able to frontline with the Sloshing Machine, because it's just going to be much slower than before. It actually gives way more time for the enemy to actually move away from the Sloshing Machine, because beforehand Sloshing Machines were just super hyper suppressive and they will just continuously slosh, and it's just like, it feels like sometimes you just never be able to get away from them. But now this definitely helps that, because if we're talking about like the minimum amount of damage, or I guess the minimum kill time in terms of a Sloshing Machine, you'd have to be taking away at least around 10 frames if I'm not mistaken. Well, 10 extra frames that now you have to add on to the Sloshing Machine. So general playing the Sloshing Machine is going to be feeling a whole lot more sluggish. I think I want to bring up one really cool point where indirectly it makes things like the Slosher a little bit more playable. Let me just show you the comparisons in terms of the Slosher and the Sloshing Machine right now. So when you look at the Slosher's continuous attacking speed, you can just straight up tell that, wow, you know, I mean, compared to what the Sloshing Machine is right now, it is much faster. As you can see, the Sloshing Machine is just way slower with those extra 5 frames. Now, I wanted to do a little comparison of the old Sloshing Machine and the regular Slosher. Of course, the Slosher was still faster, but the Sloshing Machine back then wasn't too far off in terms of the speed. But when we put the two together of the current Sloshing Machine versus the Slosher, it is a huge difference, where you can see it feels like it takes an eternity for the Sloshing Machine to now slosh, and the Slosher is just vibing, just being able to go through a bunch of sloshes before the Sloshing Machine even gets one. This is great and so much more healthy for Splatoon 3, because the Sloshing Machine in 3.1, it generally was just one of the best weapons to use in terms of slaying. And what this allows is that it makes other slaying weapons feel like they actually have a place, and it's not really a thing where you just have to use Sloshing Machine because it's literally just better than everything else. Now, you can actually probably consider using Slosher, because beforehand it was just like, well, what would be the point? You might as well use the Sloshing Machine. So this is super healthy for the game. I still think the Sloshing Machine will still be strong in its own right with what it can do, and that very large hitbox that it still has not gone away. So, but at this point in time, I feel like it probably needs it, because it's now much slower, and you know, it kind of needs a little something to actually be able to do something now. So we just kind of have to wait to see how it fares with, you know, other weapons in the game too. The Splatana Stamper is also a very interesting case where it has a large painting nerf. In the previous patch, it had about 25 to 26 swings, and now in patch 4.0, it only has about 18 to 19 swings, which is roughly, of course, 30% of its ink tank not even there anymore. Now, I'm sure this is going to be much more noticeable, especially when you start mixing in the burst bomb with it too. It's just generally going to feel like you're going to have just a lack of ink or a lack of extra swings that you had before. So now, if you're planning to use the Splatana Stamper, you definitely have to put some Ink Saver main or ink recovery of some sort just to be able to actually like accommodate for some extra swings and all that type of stuff. So I think it's just one of the things that the Stamper really does best, and just holding down the area and just being very annoying with just constant swings and all that type of stuff. So yeah, it's going to be something that you have to put on and look out for, because QR is not going to cut it. One thing I also wanted to try out was the zipcaster, which was, I guess, somewhat of a mythbuster thing, just so I wanted to try out for myself. It seems like the zipcaster isn't exactly affected too much in terms of the test that I did. I basically did the exact same actions when using zipcaster, and it didn't seem like the Stamper actually ran out of more ink than it did. So maybe it's a thing that the zipcaster actually has its own like committed ink tank, and it's not exactly, it doesn't exactly matter if a weapon gets more of an ink tank or less of an ink tank. The zipcaster would probably stay the same, which does make sense. I feel like the special has to only last so long. So the zipcaster basically not so much affected, but it was a good thing just to try and just show you guys that that's the case. Right, so one of the more interesting things that I wanted to bring up for this video is that the Big Bubbler had this really nice buff, where it is now even more buff, where it's just a larger bubble that can just fit so many more things inside, like, I guess, all your teammates, or having a teammate and a crab. It's just a much safer bubble than before. However, the thing you have to look out for is that it does have the same amount of health when it comes to fighting main weapons in particular. It did receive a buff in terms of certain special weapons where the Big Bubbler is just not as affected by them as much as before. So I first tried out how Tentamissiles fare against the Big Bubbler. Beforehand in patch 3.1, it was pretty defendable, but it would depend on when you would actually put the Big Bubbler out first. If you put out the Big Bubbler too early, it would lose too much health, where it might not be able to withstand all Tentamissiles. However, in patch 4.0, it does definitely seem like if you put the Big Bubbler out a little early, then the Big Bubbler should be able to withstand all the missiles, making sure that you are safe. I also tried this out with Crank Tank shooting the main shield of the Big Bubbler. In patch 3.1, it should be able to shoot through the shield pretty easily. In patch 4.0, it does seem like the Big Bubbler is still a little bit more sturdier. However, at some point, the bubble shield will eventually break. I also did try this with it hitting the critical point of the bubble shield. It is pretty much the same scenario, where the shield is definitely a little bit sturdier against this special. I'd also like to mention that this is actually without Object Shredder, so I'm pretty sure if you put some Object Shredder on, it'll still be able to go through the shield quite easily. So it's probably going to be a little bit more of a necessity to make sure that you are wearing Object Shredder to be able to actually shred these big bubbles. I also tried this with Triple Ink Strike just to see. One strike seems like it does quite a lot to the bubble shield, which of course is something, but you probably need to think about it like this. Would you actually be wanting to stand inside your bubble shield when a Triple Ink Strike is actually going off? I don't think you'd want to, so I would confidently say that even though the Triple Ink Strike may do a little less damage than before, it's probably going to have the same effect every single time, because it's going to remove everyone from that big bubble in the first place. So either way, a bigger bubble shield is always good. It makes weapons like the Custom Blaster in particular, and maybe even the Junior, seem a little bit more playable than before. And the incoming H3 that's going to have Splash Ball and Big Bubbler is going to be much more of a threat, especially if Big Bubbler becomes more of a special that people actually want to get. So I can definitely see this coming through during Sizzle season, and people playing it more, so I'm looking forward to it. The last thing that I wanted to mention was the Splash-o-matic, which had a 10% lower ink spread when generally shooting with this weapon. Now, in the dev notes, they actually said that they did this to lower the amount of paint suppression that gets inflicted on the enemies when, of course, the Splash-o-matic is just generally fighting. Now, it's really hard to see the difference between patch 3.1 and patch 4.0, but it almost doesn't seem like an actual proper paint nerf, if you know what I mean. It's definitely a nerf for the Splash-o-matic to make sure that it doesn't have fighting capabilities against weapons that have much longer range than it did before. So I think that's what they were trying to fix with it. The Splash-o-matic is still probably going to be able to get as many crab tanks as possible, although Big Bubbler is going to be probably played a little bit more, which is definitely good. I think people are going to be wanting to pick it up more. However, I do feel like Big Bubbler will probably still struggle against things like, of course, Double Crab if they do come about now these days, which I think is still probably going to be still strong in some cases. But the thing is, I also feel like the Double Crab Sloshing Machine kind of thing probably is not going to be seen as much, considering the Sloshing Machine has also received a little bit of a nerf too. So it's going to be a really interesting time to see how things progress in the Splatoon scene and how Sizzle season kind of comes about. Sizzle season is dropping tonight, and I will be streaming my first impressions of it. So if you guys would like to come and join me and hang out with me with it, link in the description below, or join my public Discord because you'll be notified when I go live. So I'll probably be live after I get this video out, so just letting you know that too. So yeah, I stream on Twitch. Either way, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts on the patch, your first impressions, and are you as happy as me that the Sloshing Machine is nerfed to a decent amount? Because I'm really happy about that. I don't know about you guys, but thank God. I hated fighting against that thing. Either way, guys, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you guys in a future video.